Still not working. Yeah, we had some issues with the clickers. Now it's fixed. It's amazing. Yeah. Thank you very much, guys, for turning up. Just a small disclaimer about this session. It's about gaming. I know in your pamphlets it says for general markets. So this is for gaming. You can stay if you want to if you're not a gamer. But just to keep you expectations right, just the translation went off from English to Chinese. So just to set the expectations right for there. Okay, so 你好，我叫阿 Ahmed，我是一个人，也是伊拉克人。And that's my only Chinese I know, so I'm not gonna keep the session in Chinese, but please put those earpieces in and listen in to the translation, please. Thank you. So yeah, today we're gonna talk about in this session about the 2017 global markets, where the opportunity is in terms of gaming, and where you should export in 2017. And in this session, we're going to talk specifically more about the Middle East and North Africa. It's not the only growth region, but it's the one that actually grows the most. So we're going to do a slight deep dive into that region and how you can localize and be successful in the region. Okay? So we're going to talk about three things today. First, the global markets, as I said. Do the slight deep dive into Middle East and how you localize in that region, as well as how to win and how to go forward in that region. So let's identify the key markets in 2017 and look at the global map in that first stage. So if we look at revenue, and let's ask ourselves first a question. If you're not exporting app, I'll give you a reason why to do it. If we did Google Play did a great research the other year about the growth of installs that comes from global apps, which is app companies that have more than penetration in more than 5 markets versus single app markets. And the ones that are global have 2.4 times more install growth than the markets with single market apps with single market installs. So it's a great incentive to actually go abroad because you can find your audience. You can find audience also that are more valuable to you than in your home markets. All right. So if we look at the 3 stages of exporting your app in the first place, not just your game, but the app in the first place. So first, we identify the opportunity. So how do we do that? First, we need to identify our KPIs in the first place. What does matter in the market that I'm going into? And which stage of me launching the app am I into? Is it installs that I'm actually focusing on, or is it LTV or return on investment? What is it? Identify those key metrics and then look into data. And there is plenty of third-party data, including Google, that can help you identify those markets. The second part is actually localizing the app itself. We're going to go through a couple of stages. Earlier we had the Go Global with Google Play, explaining how you can localize the app. But also Google can help to localize the ads, which is the front face, often the first interaction that a potential gamer or an installer would have with you through your ads. So a good way to identify markets is looking at your own data. Sometimes that could give a great indication of where the data is. So this is a snapshot from our test account at Firebase, looking at where the data is coming from in terms of country and region first. So the US in this instance gives a lot of traffic, but also the smaller markets like in the Europe or the UK, as well as in Asia, but also looking at different demographics and other sub-segments of your data that gives you more indication where to head. So let's look at the revenue that are coming in through mobile gaming in the first place. So this is Newzoo data. This is not ours. So this is unified both iOS and Android. So we look at most of the money that comes in through mobile gaming is actually from APAC. No surprises there. About 45% of the global revenue is actually coming in from APAC. And a distant second is from the North America, with Western Europe and Latin America following slow after. Middle East is still on a low part in comparison to the other region, but it actually grows the most. So 26.6% is estimated growth between 2015 and 2016. And Latin America is also showing quite interesting growth in that aspect, especially countries like Mexico, Argentina, but also the smaller South American markets like Uruguay, Peru. But we're going to take a closer look, as we said, at the Middle East region, as well as the North African region. So yeah, for 2017. So there's 3 reasons. I like to talk about things in threes, so you're gonna notice that in the presentation so far, in the coming presentation now. So the first one is scale. You can find markets in the Middle East and North African region that provides you with great scale. Like countries like Morocco, Egypt, have a lot of people. Although maybe not the highest return on investment, but there's a lot of installs coming in from there. And you can also find markets with high lifetime value, giving great returns, especially for games. Countries like UAE or Israel or Saudi Arabia has a great amount of volume of people with deep pockets putting into games. The third reason also, which is quite rare wherever you go, especially here in APAC, is actually low competition in the region. The competition can best be described as fragmented. And there is quite a small scene of really large players, local players, that are still in the region. And most of those players are from Israel or from the UAE. In the other markets, they're quite small and haven't really penetrated the market successfully. So there's a big opening for you guys as developers, as gaming developers, to actually enter the region through, because the competition is quite low and fragmented. Yeah. So what are the growth drivers that drives that growth in the Middle East? Right now we see a huge upswing in care billing, which is very important for developing nations in the region, especially when we have partnered up with carriers in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, where the credit card penetration is actually quite low. So now we can successfully drive those revenue bits from gamers in that region. But also the mobile penetration is on the up. It's growing a lot, especially coming in from Egypt. If we look at that as a country with more than 60 million people, and people are actually going mobile only, not just mobile first, but mobile only. So the mobile penetration is increasing a lot, and people are using it for a variety of tasks. But also in terms of barriers to entry, there's a low financial and technical barrier to enter there, especially care billing has solved the financial issues over there as well. Okay, so let's look at the top markets. First, in terms of volume. So Saudi Arabia is the largest market in terms of volume. This is google.com queries, not necessarily installs, but in terms of interest on google.com, Saudi Arabia shows its muscles with a lot of queries in the gaming sector. And this is between Q1, Q3, 16, so this is not the full year. The picture might change at the end of the year, but nonetheless, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, as well as Israel, Morocco, and UAE following after. What is most interesting is that Egypt is growing the most, as we noticed before. It's a country with a lot of high volume, but is also growing the most. But Saudi Arabia is also showing a lot of potential in the region. And one note to make is actually Morocco is on the slight decline. There's no real explanation why. It's just generally the gaming interest has gone down slightly year on year. No, we should do this. Here we go. So, which type of games are the most interesting, and what are the type of games that people in MENA are playing? So, massive multiplayer online games are very popular, as well as casual games. And I would say casual games is more tailored towards the female segment. So if we take in as example, Saudi Arabia, the casual games in that region is very driven by the female demographic. But also, I know there's a big scene for role-playing games here in China. There's quite an interest overall also in role-playing games, and that's also the sector that is growing the most. Okay, so I would like to look first at the cost and then look at the return on investment to see how attractive a market is in terms of entry. In terms of CPI, this is CPI from Google Play only. We don't have the iOS store. We can't really share that. But if we look at the Google Play CPI, and we share a range, I don't want to give you a specific number because we can't really do that, but in terms of a range between a low range and a high range, Saudi Arabia ranks the highest right now. We've seen a sudden influx, especially during Q3, of a few Israeli game players who've gone in there and jacked up the CPI slightly. UAE, Israel is coming there in the mid-range, and Egypt and Morocco are the cheapest country to target in terms of cost per install. There we go. All right, we've seen that those countries have high costs, like Saudi, like UAE and Israel, but also they have quite a high return. This is the lifetime value, so over the last 90 days, how many installs are driven in the country, but also how much revenue in terms of in-app purchases are driven. Then we divide it between each other and create an index over it. So UAE is driving the most amount of in-app purchases per install, followed by Israel and Saudi Arabia. Also no surprises there because of the low income barrier in Morocco and Egypt, we end up in a slightly lower tier over there. So this is a suggested model for you to look at if you want to tier markets up and see, okay, which is the most interesting market for me to enter in, rather than looking as like, should I go to a high LTV market or a low CPI market? Mix them up and tier them up. That's the smart thing to do. So in this case, countries in the tier 1 segment, which is the blue piece, has a high LTV but a low CPI, so the best of two worlds, or a relatively high LTV and low CPI. And following down to the segments of 2 and 3, where you have high LTV and a high CPI, a low LTV and a low CPI, but also basically the gray basket here is countries or markets maybe to avoid or maybe look at alternatives way of targeting them. So in this instance, taking the top 5 markets, Israel is the only country they end up in the tier 1. As we saw earlier, Israel provided with moderate CPIs, but also quite good returns. So it's a good market to actually target because it provides the best of two worlds. Speaking of, Saudi ends up somewhere in the middle, but ends up slightly on the high CPI stage. It had the highest CPI, but also provided actually quite good returns together with UAE. So yeah, Egypt and Morocco ends up on a slight downturn on low CPI as well as low returns on investment. For the markets that have low returns, like Egypt and Morocco, it can be, you can also, through AdWords, also target high-end Android devices like Samsung S7 Edge or those really expensive devices. They tend to also have similar returns. All right? So, okay, how do we localize in Middle East and North Africa? So there's a couple of things to consider. So first of all, why should you localize in that first instance? First of all is discoverability. People will find your app much easier. That's the most obvious reason. Having just localized keywords, for instance, so localized string and the app description, it just helps people to find the app much easier. But also local app team stores like in Google Play, they're looking for apps that have good rating, but also localized feeling that they want to feature on their page. So just translating the front end in terms of the Play Store text just makes you more discoverable and more favorable in the Play Store team's eyes. The second thing is about the engagement. About 72% of users we've interviewed in the past prefer a localized app, especially in the Middle East, as well as we've seen an upturn in terms of both engagement and returns on investment for apps that have localized. And the third bit is about the experience. Are this on? Yeah. Brands tend to also strengthen their experience with the users by localizing in the local language. It just looks so much better when you have, for instance, a game coming into China. You don't want to have it in English, you want to have it in Chinese, and you want to have it fully in Chinese, both culturally and on the translation piece. And in terms of, if we look at the Middle East in terms of regions, there is a lot of sub-regions in the Middle East. There's not just one big region. And it's the easiest way to look at it. It's in three regions. The first one is the GCC, which is the Gulf Coast, as we call it. It's around Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, Oman, and also Saudi Arabia. They encompass in this high-income region, very oil-rich nations that are quite culturally similar to each other, and they're quite easy to target in one bunch. But also there is also differences, obviously, between the countries, but they're quite similar in terms of localization, in terms of culture, and also language. The second region we're talking about is the Levant, which is Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, as well as Syria. Those markets are also quite similar to each other in many different ways. Right now, politically, they're very similar to each other, but also in terms of language and how they speak. More specifically, Syria and Lebanon are quite similar to each other, as well as Jordan. With Iraq, it'd be slightly different type of language used. And the third one would be the Maghreb region, which is the North African region. Talking about the language itself, it's quite similar. You can use the same type of sort of expressions and idioms used in those in that language, in that region, with the exception of Egypt. That's its own small region because the language is just so different, as well as the culture. There we go. So there's also difference, as I said before, in terms of language preference, just looking at it. Although I strongly recommend to localize fully in Arabic. More than 50% of more than 5 in 10 users would prefer to have it a localized app in Arabic, and it's one of the most widely spoken languages in the world. However, if you want to enter easily with an English-speaking app and don't have the means to translate or localize, UAE probably would be the easiest market to enter, because it's take an example like Dubai, which is one of the Emirates in the United Emirates region. 90% of them are expats who speak English, so there will be less of a problem going into that region. But for the other countries, do localize, not just the language, but also the culture is super important, especially, we're going to look at it a little bit later, for Saudi Arabia. Yeah, and there's a couple of things to consider when you translate. So for instance, having the right translations and the right variety of different languages in the region is important. For instance, if we look at the third bit over there, when you translate it directly from a foreign language into Arabic, it can be, the language can look very weird, like it does here right now. It might not see it from the front, but this is actually, we tend to put the characters together so it forms into a word. So here they're all disconnected from each other, but the right way to do it in Arabic is actually write it together like this and connect the words together. So that's something to do, and the main point here is hiring a local translator to do all of these things and not just machine translate the whole into Arabic. It can be very, very wrong and actually have a negative impact on the user experience. But also the UI is important to localize, because most of the UIs, the UIs in the Arabic it's not from left to right, it's actually from right to left. The language is written differently. So if you have menus and all of these things, it's important to localize the whole look and feel of it into right to left. Yeah, and we have a couple of examples here of companies that done very well. For instance, Casa Clash from IGG.com has done it very well in terms of just looking at their App Store localization, completely in Arabic, but also the screenshots, if you look at it here, they're completely in Arabic. But also the icons and the characters have been modified to the local culture. This is an example from Saudi Arabia. So The female character here has a small veil. I don't know how you feel about that, but in terms of how they actually spoke to the local population, they added that because local women cover up their faces, so that's what they did with the local icon as well. There we go. And they saw a great uplift. So the whole localization effort they took from there actually saw a great uplift. In terms of active installs in the region, they saw a 48% uplift, and the revenue took a 58% uplift just 4 months after they localized the game. So another company that did it quite well was Zeptolab, who grew quite nicely in the Middle East in the last year or so. So they localized also the same thing. They took the screenshots and the whole description as well as the in-game, and the active install on Google Play rose by more than 74% over the 4-month period. So okay, so can someone? it's something that went really viral on the internet a couple of years ago. Is this painting from the Spanish painter who forgot this painting inside a church, and this old lady 3 years ago took this painting and tried to repair it because it was slightly damaged. This is a painting of Jesus, so she tried to repair it, and it started looking more like this. So what we're trying to say here is you need to be more on the native check. You have to localize correctly. It has to look like the original. So if you look at local games and how they succeed, they look like they're local. So you know, don't be that painting over there and try to copy paste. So do it more on the native side and be very local in your approach. And also avoid stereotypes. You know, in the Arab region, there's a lot of controversies in media, and there's a lot of things in tension politically and all these things, as well as in movies and other cultural aspects. They tend to have a negative Arab stereotype. So avoid those things when releasing new games, as well as in the in-app characters. Don't have that negative stereotype. This is a couple of examples from American movies where they portrayed Arabs quite negatively and actually quite severe impact on the movies being popular in the Middle East in the first place, right? So, and also another thing to consider is that the Middle East region is rife. It has a lot of different seasonalities. We celebrate a lot of different things, more specifically like Eid al-Adha, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca that Muslims take to Saudi Arabia, and that's something that is happening every year. But another thing that is more specific for gaming is really important is Ramadan. It's a 4-week period. It's a month, somewhere in June, July nowadays. It goes back 10 days every year. People tend to have an uprise in terms of games installs as well as revenue share spend during that time. So it's quite important to be in those seasonalities to boost your installs and boost your revenues. But also another thing that in the Gulf Coast region, August is so hot that people stay inside, and we see a slight rise in terms of gaming activities during that time. So as we see here, as I said about Ramadan, people tend to spend more time inside because, I don't know if you know, Ramadan, it's a fasting period, so people don't eat, and they tend to stay inside, don't go to work either. And that phenomena is more known in the Gulf Coast region, where people can afford to stay at home and not work. So the gaming revenue tend to go up for all ages. This is 4 weeks prior to Ramadan. It just goes up during the 4 weeks, and during Ramadan, it just goes up in terms of revenue spent in the games. And the region is crazy about YouTube. It is, if there is one way I would tell you to reach users in that region, is YouTube. The watch time is off the hook. If we look at, for instance, like Kuwait, which is the neighboring country of Iraq, it had twice the watch time of users in the US who are already quite savvy YouTube users. But all the, you look at UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, they're all much more than the US. And they're very engaged users, And entertainment is just a big subject in terms of entertainment consumed. And that's something to keep in mind when targeting the region, is that YouTube is probably the one best way to actually enter the region, is create content for YouTube. So as I said before, the region is quite diverse and it's very different. One way to look at it is how much they've adopted some of the religious aspects of the region. So Saudi Arabia, if we look at one end, which is they tend to be more conservative. And that's something to consider when you target the country through different creatives, but also the in-game aspect of it. So for instance, female characters should not be, showing too much skin, and also avoid those regional issues in that aspect, and don't offend the religion in any way. Just have a closer look of exactly what that means for you guys. But on the other end, you have countries who are a little bit more liberal, where those things are not an issue, but countries like Lebanon and Israel tend to be quite rife with political issues. Those are the things that you should avoid, especially in Israel, with the Israel-Palestine conflict. So that's something to just really, really avoid. But as I said, the region is very diverse, and it's different. Like, targeting has a different implication wherever you go in those countries. Okay. So in terms of localization, you can do it in a smart way. You don't have to go fully local and native. We can make it easy and just divide them by 3 in a bunch. Sorry. So first of all, it's just like unlocking that new opportunity, testing the market. You can localize some of the aspects of the place or items, maybe have the screenshots of the promotion, use the localized, the automatic translation that Google Play provides, but also maybe doing APK translation, as well as the screenshot of promotions maybe can be localized as well. The next step is just to ramp up the advancement in terms of localization, is letting them know that you actually care about the users. So that can be going a little bit further by translating the app string, for instance, or localizing the app screenshots, not just the promotions. But the absolute best way to actually absolutely go local and team up and partner up with local teams to help you translate the whole game, as well as co-partner with marketing agencies to actually get that local look and feel. So that's like, the 3 different ways where you can do it. But as we said before, you can beta test the market by having limited localization in that effort. You can just start looking at the first bucket of the of localization. There we go. Okay, so what are the key takeaways in this segment? The global markets are all increasing in terms of the opportunity for gaming and for instance, but the Middle East is showing the most progression in terms of growth, and that's the key region I wanna tell you about you guys today. It's a great opportunity with low barriers, especially countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel showing the best returns, as well as the trade-off between cost and returns. Multiplayer games, as well as casual games, are very popular. And another thing, also the third thing when we talk about localization, is having that native check. The localization feel is extremely important when you go to to that region. But also having the right targeting in terms of seasonality, like Ramadan is very important for increasing that gaming revenue during that period, as well as August in certain regions of the Middle East. Okay, so I think that's it for me. If there's any questions, maybe not immediately, we can take it afterwards. I'm here for about 30 minutes more.
有一个 Q&A 环节啊，哪一位想要问问题的，中英文都可以，咱们这儿有 Google 的同事可以帮大家来翻译。如果是中文提问的话，如果有的话，请举手示意一下。
Hello， Thanks for your introduction. I have a question about the payment method. Because the question is if the app, the game integrate with the carrier billing, is it allowed to publish in Google Play? Because according to my knowledge, it's not allowed in Latin America. I don't know if it's okay in the MENA. I mean, if the game integrated with carrier billing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said carrier billing is one of the most important payment method in Middle East.
It's
and
an
North
up and
America.
coming. I'm not aware of any legal issues or policy issues that we have, but we've recently teamed up, for instance, for the Saudi telecom players to have carrier billing integrated into our platform as well. I'm not aware of any policy issues in any ways.
Okay.
But maybe we can double check that for you and maybe send out a clear answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
大家是否还有问题要询问老师？
Hello. Yeah, it's a great speech. Learned a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you. And the quick question is that you mentioned that Arabic is the language. I'm not sure. Arabic is the language that covers MENA, but you know there are also a lot of difference. You mentioned like GCC and also the Maghreb area. That what's the language difference between those areas, or can we just localize the game for Arabic and just for one region and it will work automatically for the rest?
Yeah, it's more of the expressions used in the language. So the written Arabic is very similar wherever you go. It's the spoken Arabic that is different.
Okay.
So you know, certain dialects can be so different that people don't understand each other, and also the expressions used are different from different regions. So in terms of, if you want to go safe, as I said, you have those three main regions that I pointed out. They're quite similar in terms of even lingual similarities between each other.
Okay, so
Yeah.
pretty much like spoken language is much different, but written
Yes.
language is
The
pretty
written
much
language is
similar.
pretty uniform.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you very much, guys, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day.